Hello, I am delighted to be able to introduce to you David Manning, who has a business called David Manning Energy Works. And I have worked with David for a number of years now, but I only had the pleasure of meeting him face to face a couple of months ago, actually, when I went down to where he lives on the south coast of England and for a retreat that he was doing. So he has very kindly agreed to meet with me today and let me interview him about his awakening journey. Hello, David.
Shuna, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to get to chat with you in this way, and about what is my favourite subject, really, this extraordinary journey that we're all engaged in now.
Yeah. So would you like to maybe start with a little bit, just to fill in the listeners to what it is that you actually do, a wee bit about you, where you live, and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I live on the south coast of England, moved here recently from London, spent a long time in London. I have an online business, as you mentioned, called David Manning Energy Work, and I work primarily through teleconferences. So in a way, I perceive energies that are rising in the collective or are relevant for the collective. And I write newsletters about those, and I'm starting to create videos about that sort of thing. And then I offer teleconferences on those energetic events that we come together as a group, usually quite a significant size group of people all around the world. And we do a piece of energy work in what I term a group field. And there's a lot of dynamism to those pieces of energy work. And from my perspective, they're offerings to the wider collective as well. They ripple out beyond the 150 or so people that gather on the teleconferences. So that's the main body of my work. I also work one-to-one and do in-person events too. But mostly my work is focused online.
Yeah, and that's very much how I met you, and I've taken part in I think pretty much most of those online energy works that you've done over the last 3 years, and they are becoming increasingly powerful, which is probably indicative of not only my own growth journey, but also how things are changing in the world very much.
I think.
Yeah. Indeed. Anyway, to get back to what we're talking about, reel myself in. How was it that you awakened then? At what stage in your life was it? And was it sudden catalyst, or after a slow burn, or what was it?
It's all of us are totally unique in that process. As a child, I was very multidimensional, you could say. So I had a lot of out-of-body experiences. There was a lot of trauma in my childhood, which the benefit of that, weirdly enough, was that it kept me out of body. It kept me dissociated, in a sense. And so the out-of-body stuff was easy for me. It kept channels open that perhaps if you have a more regular childhood, would have naturally closed down. And there was always an internal voice, a voice in my head, until I was about 7 years old. And then that voice informed me that it was leaving, and I was bereft. I always have this memory of standing in the playground at school, in junior school, feeling just so lost because this inner presence had gone, and feeling very abandoned. So then that stuff closed down, and I led a reasonably regular life. My life has never been regular in any way, shape, or form, though. And when I was 27, I was, through my 20s, 30s, I used a lot of drugs and alcohol. When I was 27, I was home from work, and I was standing in the kitchen rolling a joint, and I started hearing a voice, and it was like, okay, maybe I'm using too many of these things, or maybe I'm not using enough of these things. But that voice started telling me things. It was a voice I sort of recognized, and it led me, literally, pushed me through the door of the College of Psychic Studies, which was a place that opened up for me very well. I was embraced by that place, and I studied there. I did lots of different courses in psychic development and healership and it all opened up very quickly. And, on uh, the second week of my first healing course, I was invited to go and work in the healing clinic because they saw that I was very natural with that sort of thing. And it was natural. I didn't know how I knew what I knew, but I knew a lot of stuff as soon as I put my hands on somebody in that capacity. And I've had endless shit to deal with. My inner turmoil, my inner demons, and that continues for me. It's an ongoing process, but it's really one of the big difficulties for me was accepting that somebody as screwed up, I believed, as myself, could also have this experience, this access to such beauty, such grace. And that confused the hell out of me because I was the furthest away from a spiritual person that you could imagine. And that too is now, I understand, one of the benefits because we are all this, regardless of what we've experienced, what we've done, what's happened to us. We are all this, and it's just the most natural thing in the world. So
So
that's, yeah.
yeah, so many people go through that. That seems to be from people I've spoken to, where they were manifesting these kinds of abilities and things at the beginning, and then all of a sudden it closed down, especially during their teenage years. Or maybe, do you think when it comes to that point where you close yourself down, and you have to go on this period of abandoning yourself almost to be able to then come back and start coming back on your path. So it seems to be quite interesting that you've
I
done
think
that
it's
too.
it's classical part of what is an archetypal journey, isn't it? The loss of self and the return home. We all do it, and we all tend to blame our parents and for that process. And sure, they're engaged in that process, but it's set up the same steps for everybody, just different details in effect. And it's important. I think it was important for me that stuff closed down so that I had some semblance of a foothold in reality, as it were. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have survived. The pull into the other realms would have been too strong. And it always was strong for me anyway, and that's one of the big struggles for me has been to stay on the planet.
Right. Yeah. So mine was when I was 38. I suddenly, I realised just how completely far from me, like I didn't know whose life I was living, but it wasn't mine. And then started on that path journey. So there's always this kind of movement away from being who you are to coming back to being who you are. It seems to be very, as you say, a very common archetype. So so what's your journey been like then over the past number of years with it? Has it been 100 miles an hour, or some ups, downs?
I don't know, to be honest. It's been my journey, and I have no way to gauge the speed of it. It has felt interminably slow for me because I have been very, very resistant and had a lot of really messy stuff to work through. But there were capacities and abilities that were natural to me that opened very easily. And that sort of got me into a lot of trouble too, because I was aware that I was sort of very naturally psychic, and I was aware that was the most real stuff I ever touched. And I knew, sitting in psychic development classes, that these energies, this experience that I was opening to, I knew that it wanted all of me, and that totally terrified me. And so I went into massive resistance, and my resistance, coalesced around addiction. So I was having these very beautiful, luminous inner experiences and talking to others about their connection and helping them to feel much better. But I was ripping myself in two in terms of a deep, deep unwillingness to let go of my addiction and come into alignment with what is beginning to open up on the inside. And it was extraordinarily painful, so much so that I almost died with that. And yeah, I sort of, looking back, I wish I had made it easier on myself, but I also appreciate the intensity of the experiences I've had, because those have taught me a lot too,
Mm.
and helped me relate across a lot of different spectrums.
Mm. It's one of the things that happens when you get to older age now, and I think I'm quite a bit older than you, that you look back over the years and you start to see clearly the patterns, and you realize that, if that hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened. And no, I understand exactly why that happened, even although it was really awful to go through it at the time. You understand the
Yeah,
perfection of
yeah,
it all and the perfection of your journey.
yeah,
And that's when it's really beautiful, and you start to appreciate that everything you go through is always for your highest good, even although it's absolutely awful at the time you're going through it.
yeah. And it's lovely then when you start to appreciate it in the midst of it,
Yeah.
even when you're in really shitty times. You think, well, I know I can already see the benefits that will unfold from this, and that's lovely. So then that a lot of the resistance has let go, and you're just surrendering more and more deeply into the process. And it isn't, that's the thing. I think there's a common misperception that, once I've awakened, once I've opened it, life will be smooth, and it isn't. It just
Yeah.
isn't. Sometimes it gets to, we've got really deep collective patterning that emerges in our system and through our system, and sometimes that's very dense and very heavy to deal with. And life doesn't go according to plan. Shitty things happen: divorces, bankruptcies, illnesses, deaths. It all continues to roll on, and how you deal with it then becomes
Yeah.
well, that's the essence of the journey in a sense.
Yeah, it's not that it changes things that happen. What it does is it changes how you look at things that happen and how you perceive them, and how you there can't be many people except those that are on the path that turn around and go, oh good, I'm feeling really shitty about something, I wonder what's coming up, I must start to investigate this. And you start to actually look at it positive, because it means that it's an opportunity for you to grow and expand in a new way. And often what happens is, as soon as you've made that realization, whatever it is that's happening kind of starts to shift anyway, and you come
Yeah,
through it
yeah,
a lot more
yeah.
quickly. And things are happening a lot more quickly now than they did 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. So
Yeah, they certainly are, aren't they? Yeah, yeah. But
stuff that
it is that thing of turning and facing an event, an inner experience, rather than what I used to do was run and hide and end up in a bar and, shit faced on whatever. Now it's like, okay, I can really feel that something's going on here, and turning and facing and exploring the patterning.
yeah.
And then it falls apart, as you say, much, much more quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, doing drugs and alcohol and whatever is very much a classic numbing, to numb yourself to the emotions and the things that you're going through, so that you don't have to look at them. And it's only when you turn around and face them that they start to become.
Yeah, yeah. And in a weird way also, it was part of my expansion too, because some of those experiences really sort of opened the field up to higher levels, to higher dimensions, deep psychic experiences. So there's always a weird mix, that there's always benefit to every single thing we do, no matter how how awful it seems. There will be gems of wisdom in something that we can mine later on. So
Indeed.
yeah.
So you've mentioned a few of the things that you do in terms of energy work and whatever, but would you maybe like to explain a little bit about about your giftings and the sort of abilities that you have, your psychic aspect of that, and tell us a bit about how they developed?
They were just there. To be honest, I was very psychic as a child, and very as I say, very multi. I mean, I always have these memories of, I would just close my eyes lying on the sofa at home, close my eyes, and there was another world going on behind my eyes that I couldn't quite fathom. And I'd open my eyes, and I'd be back in the living room at home, and I'd close my eyes, and there'd be this whole other world. And I thought I was sort of mad, but that other world felt delicious, and I longed to be there rather than out here in the 3D world, which wasn't so lovely for me as a child. they were always, and those capacities had to close down for me to have this experience of regular life. And then they opened up again, and it opened up. Hearing voices was the first thing, but I had always been very empathetic or empathic. I sort of knew how people were feeling and why, if I thought about it. I just didn't tend to think about it too much because I assumed, well, everybody must know that, you know.
Mm.
But I realized afterwards that not everybody does feel along those lines. And I understand that my system is deeply tuned into collective fields, whatever that means. But I feel big patterns of energy and see them. And I have a capacity to interpret and translate fields of energy, put them into language that helps others to make sense of some of those patterns that they might be experiencing too. Um, yeah, and it's that I believe that those are skills that I learnt in other times. But I sat in psychic development circles in the College of Psychic Studies for 5 years to sharpen these abilities, and that was an extraordinary gift for me to do that. It was lovely. I had great teachers there who were, strict and sharp and very loving, because I was terrified of this opening. Really, really terrified. And we used to have to practice on each other and go out and record mini readings with other students in the class. And I would be so, so scared of having to be my name called to do that this week, sort of thing. But it was an amazing training that really helped me to develop confidence in what I was experiencing, perceiving. And then it just got wider and wider. And there was a time when a Native American shaman came into my field and said, okay, everything you've learned about healing, you can put it to one side because it's got nothing to do with how we're going to be working.
Oh.
And it was like, oh, but I could feel the difference in my field as he entered, and my field just got a lot bigger. And then he said to me, I was having some trouble accepting him. I was a bit resistant. And he just said, I'm you in another lifetime. And I understood, I felt the truth of that, and that just relaxed. And that was the first big integration of another field of wisdom that was another aspect, another dimension of me.
Mm.
Or the first conscious integration, anyway. And there have been many since that time. So a lot of those wisdoms that we tend to externalize have now integrated, and I don't sense guides around me. There's just what I term guidance that emerges, but I don't feel separate from that.
Yeah. I wonder if you'd speak to being a multidimensional being, because there's a lot of people who say, oh yes, I'm multidimensional, but for people especially who are in the early stages of their awakening, they wouldn't understand that as a concept. Is there any way that you can maybe put some, the great way that you explain things, can you maybe describe what that involves? Or?
Yeah, well, I'll have a go. I don't know that I'm going to be any good at it, but the field is that classic metaphor of the field as an onion, with all of these different layers, and those layers, if you like, are different dimensions that exist right across the universe. And we tend to have locked our consciousness into a very limited range of those dimensions. We're very 3D, we're located in physical reality, and that's where we tend to be focused. We naturally access other dimensions in the dream state, in daydreams, in meditations. Often we are wandering in other dimensions, but we snap back into a focused 3D reality in order to live our lives, really. As you start to awaken or open, what you're opening to, literally the layers of the field, like those layers of the onion, are starting to open so that you expand your awareness into other dimensions that have different rules governing them than 3D reality. So they're not as physical, they're not as solid. You might find that you're starting to perceive spirits or energy, and that's very fourth dimensional. And your whole feeling base starts to change. And in order to emerge into those other dimensions, you have to work through the patterns of belief and wounding that keep you locked into the third dimensional level of reality, to allow a smoother, clearer opening, because those patterns and wounds tend to filter what we experience. We filter the energy coming into us through those veils and patterns, and they give our experience a lot of different colors and realities. As we clear those patternings, then we get a much clearer take on reality. And as we continue to clear uh, that gets sharper and more focused and more true all of the time. And we just the journey continues. I don't think it ever stops, to be honest, but it changes note. So you're no longer as engaged in your old patterns of wounding and trauma and all of that sort of stuff. It just moves into bigger and bigger and bigger patternings that you're moving through, and bigger openings. So it's an ongoing journey. There isn't a place where you get to rest and stop. From my perspective, there's always a pressure to keep moving, to keep expanding into bigger versions of yourself, in effect.
Yeah, well, the thing is that if you stop expanding, then you move into an entropic cycle where you wind down to die if you don't keep expanding and growing. So the journey is all about expanding and growing, and even as we say, when we die in the physical realm here, we don't really die. We move on to another stage of expansion in a different dimension.
We simply drop the body, and there's a big expansion, I think, at that point. So it becomes more of an adventure than something to be resisted.
And we're moving now more into the fifth dimension and higher dimensions as well. And a lot of your work is involved. In fact, one of the most recent things that I did was moving into fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensional energy. And this kind of is maybe a good point for you to maybe explain about the sort of services and things that you offer, and get a chance to plug what you do, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I do offer one-to-ones. I don't do as many of those now, but that's certainly a possibility. And what happens in those sessions is a lot of the conditioning falls away quite quickly, and we open, well, to what's ready to open, in effect. But often, a lot of opening is ready to happen that would take quite a lot longer to work through a lot of the conditioning from, and for whatever reason, partly because I've done a lot of work here in this field to clear this one, then it really helps to open somebody to their natural potentials and deepen their alignment and their connection, certainly into the core of the earth, and then into these other dimensions, which we sort of perceive as being higher or stacked up, but they're not really. They're all around and totally interpenetrating everything. But they as we clarify some of the lower dimensions of our experience, then we naturally open to these higher dimensions. And there are integrations that happen of versions of us, past life experiences. All of these things happen quite quickly and quite smoothly in the sessions. So there's that. And then my newsletter is a useful thing to sign up for, because I talk about things that I'm currently perceiving. And of course, I'm by no means the only person doing this, and my take would be my take. Other people will have very different perceptions and understandings, but it might be worth taking a look at that or signing up for that. And then you'll get to be forewarned about the things I'm doing in terms of teleconferences and deeper bits of work, like the two-part piece we did this past weekend, or the in-person events that I do much less frequently, but from time to time. And I've got a one-day event coming up in London on the 24th of November. That's there on my website with details, and yeah, you can book for that. So yeah, I would say just check out the website and sign up for the newsletter, and
yeah. So
and have a read.
if MD wants to do that, I'll have at the end of the video. Excuse me.
Great, thank you.
I'll have at the end of the video. I'll have details of how people can get in contact with you and whatever,
cool,
which is great.
I've also got a YouTube channel that is a lot of free stuff, of course, on YouTube that is worth, and that's David Manning, or a Facebook page, David Manning Energy Work.
And you also have, I mean, one of the ways that I got in was when I heard about you at the College of Psychic Studies. I then went followed it through to your website, and I found that you had a whole load of free offerings, of free videos, and I worked my way through all of your free videos first to really get get a feel for what it was. And then once I've done that, I started and then worked through your entire back catalogue, and I went and worked through them all. You played a big part especially in my understanding of these higher realms and dimensions and how things. You were a big part of my teaching on that at that early start of my path. So I thank you for that.
Well, that's lovely to know. And what is interesting for me is looking back, and this has happened really recently. I look back over the back catalogue, as you call it, all of the different teleconferences I've done, and it's like, oh my God, look, we have worked through a lot of the layers of the human condition. And by no means everything gets cleared in a teleconference, but it's a big help. It's a big push into clearing some of these bigger patternings. Things like the Inquisition, which was a big scar in the collective, or the deeper multidimensional interference in our genetics that also happened, enslaving us. That was a big piece of work, and lots and lots and lots of different things running over a few years. And now we find ourselves in a time when I think a lot of that clearing is done, certainly for the work I'm doing, and we're now integrating these higher frequencies, higher dimensions of energy, because these dimensions are very much needed on the planet now, and they're always present, but they have to be grounded through human bodies. They have to become available, can only become available through human bodies, and we need to be acting with these higher frequencies of energy, because these high frequency energies literally will dissolve low frequency systems. So as more and more of us embody these higher frequency energies, we're simply going to be able to stand in those energetic states and say, actually, no, we're not living with these low frequency patternings, which I'm terming as fields of corruption, which have been very active on this planet for a long, long time. And the whole planet is going through a birth process at the moment, as are we, its inhabitants, not its only inhabitants by any means, but so the planet is unveiling itself from these fields of corruption, as are we. We come into an ever deeper alignment, an ever sharper state of alertness and awakeness, and we let go of the sleepy states of enmeshment that we have been wrapped in for many thousands of years. And this process is an ongoing one, and sometimes it's a bit painful, a bit tricky, a bit snarly, but it's beautiful too, because it is a birth process into a much truer state of being.
The only way that you can really move to have movement, there has to be chaos to release things so that you can find a way through them. Because if things are rigid and solid, you can't shift things as easily as when things are all chaotic and fluid and in movement. And that's probably one of the reasons why there's so much seeming chaos going on in all sorts of avenues and things, that because it's all part of the movement to allow things to, first of all, to come up to be healed, but also for them to be able to for things to be shifted into new directions. As we embody that. And I love that. Yeah, and I love that description that you did about that you were just talking about there, because it's one of the reasons that part of the course that I'm doing is about clearing the channel to allow you to have a clearer channel to be able to embody those energies, and that's part of our service. It's definitely what I feel is part of our service to the earth, to help in her ascension as well as us. Is that as we go through our own clearing process, we help to embody them in ourselves, but that we also embody them for her too. Yeah.
And the wider collective, because not everybody is able to do this work. Their lives aren't set up enough. But in effect, we are one body of humanity. There is one energy field that contains all human beings. Now, there's starting to be clearings and a big shift in that. But the work that one person does has a much wider impact than just for themselves. It always ripples out immediately to their family and to their close associates, but it impacts the whole field. So it's always a much wider piece of work than we ever give ourselves credit for, really.
Well, I mean, I could go and talk to you for the rest of the rest of the morning, but I wonder if we could maybe just sort of finish this interview off with some final advice for because a lot of the people who will be watching this video are in the earlier stages of their awakening, and I wondered if you have any advice for them, a parting thought of those of them who are just at the start of their journey.
You just have to persevere. Perseverance isn't about getting it right or perfecting anything. You just persevere, because I made so many seemingly disastrous mistakes and I screwed up time after time after time. But I kept my nose to the grindstone, in effect, and eventually things start to become smoother and make much more sense. It's really useful to find a group of people like-minded where you get support, because that's so valuable. It's also really useful to remember that there will come times when it's relevant, when it's important that you let go of that group and walk on your own for a while, because there's another group that perhaps you need to make contact with, or another piece of work. So don't cling to things when they start to feel uncomfortable. Consider, is it time for me to let go of friendships, relationships, because that happens. But yeah, finding support is a beautiful thing. And find a place on the earth that is that support too. There are many, many power points all over the planet where there's a deep upwelling of energy. These places are deeply, deeply healing and connecting. And I have had so many extraordinary and important events and deep healings, which are free from the earth gives them to you. They're totally free. So it's important to find local power points that are easy for you to access. And there are always places. Ask the earth to show you. And this can also be an amazing, beautiful level of support that deepens your connection with all of life, in effect, and isn't filtered through another human being's perceptions and emotional states. This is just the earth holding you and your body, which is the earth, and loving you as you are right here, right now, and that's extraordinarily valuable.
That's excellent. So find your tribe. Let go.
Find your place on the earth.
Find your place in the earth. Listen to your intuition and ask for support. Yeah, totally agree with all of them. Yeah, absolutely smashing. So
cool.
Anyway, it's been my pleasure and privilege to have a discussion with you this morning, and I want to thank you for all the things that you said. And I'll finish up with a slide at the end about people if they want to follow up anything, if they've been moved to about how they can get in contact with you. And I would like to say thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shuna. It's been lovely to have this connection and communication with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.